The Amazing World of Gumball is an animated series known for its boundless creativity and its ability to blend the absurd with the everyday. Throughout its seasons, it has featured episodes ranging from clever to downright baffling. In this journey, we will explore the 10 strangest episodes of the series, analyzing what makes them so peculiar, shocking, or even uncomfortable. Get ready to dive into the weirdest parts of Elmore. 1. The Slap. The strangest episode of all. The title already prepares us for something out of the ordinary, and the reality does not disappoint at all. In this episode, Gumball and Darwin invent a peculiar new way to greet each other during recess, a greeting that involves receiving an unexpected smack on the butt, which immediately breaks with any usual social convention. Darwin comments that his favorite version of this greeting is the one he receives from Tobias, the recurring antagonist in the series, introducing a very strange and comical dynamic between the characters as Tobias begins handing out these butt slaps to everyone except Gumball. This detail triggers Gumball's obsession with being the next to get that hit, becoming the main driver of the entire plot. What is most curious and funny is that Tobias seems completely incapable of landing the slap on Gumball, and this constant failure generates a series of hilarious and ridiculous situations. Gumball puts into motion all kinds of strategies, from the simplest to the most absurd, solely to get that longed-for slap, taking the viewer on a surreal journey filled with absurd humor. At one point in the episode, Gumball even sings a desperate song about his desire to be slapped, a scene that perfectly encapsulates the eccentric and unique tone of the series. Despite his efforts, all his plans end in failures that not only leave him unrewarded, but also provoke increasingly ridiculous situations, even with Tobias accidentally slapping himself, a comedic device that adds another layer of surrealism. The climax comes when both get trapped on the school roof, with no access to food or water, spending weeks in that absurd situation that seems pulled from a strange dream. Finally, Tobias gives in and slaps Gumball, but Gumball's exaggerated and comical reaction at the end of the episode closes this memorable story, standing out for its oddity and dark humor. In short, this episode is a clear example of what makes the Amazing World of Gumball special: its ability to turn an apparently simple idea into a totally absurd, irreverent, and surprising event, cementing itself as one of the strangest and most memorable episodes of the entire series. 2. The News. Information chaos in Elmore. This episode is a true madness, both visually and narratively, challenging and completely breaking the conventional structures the series normally handles. The story begins seemingly simply. Gumball and Darwin are watching the news, but instead of the traditional anchor, a character made entirely of paper appears, a visual decision that already signals something very strange and out of the ordinary is about to happen. From that moment, the episode dives into a chaotic universe where traditional narrative logic dissolves to give way to a constant torrent of absurd and wild events. The news broadcast quickly becomes a non-stop parade of unusual and surreal information. The news presented, although fitting within Elmore's bizarre and colorful world, would be utterly delirious to any outside viewer, creating a sense of confusion and bewilderment. Characters and situations overlap and transform without any clear connection, and the narrative abandons the traditional purpose of telling a story to embrace spontaneity and absolute nonsense. One of the most memorable and characteristic aspects of this episode is its ability to mock itself, and more broadly, television in general. It includes a prolonged sequence where only an empty and repetitive dialogue is heard, a clear reference to so-called filler episodes, and the overabundance of content without substance in some shows. This self-reference is a perfect example of the meta-humor of the Amazing World of Gumball, showing the creative freedom of the team and questioning the need for every episode to have a solid or conventional plot. Furthermore, the visual design and editing contribute to creating an experience that feels like a fever dream or an acid trip, where the strange and the absurd coexist without pause. Although for some, this episode might seem simply like filler, for fans it represents the pinnacle of experimentation and creative madness that defines the series, becoming a clear example of how Gumball dares to break rules and play with form and content in a unique and unrepeatable way. 3. The Send. Magic out of control. In this chapter, the story takes an even stranger and more surreal turn when the police raid a suspicious character's van and discover a series of magical objects that defy all everyday logic. From an umbrella capable of controlling the weather to a possessed doll that seems to have a life of its own, and a lamp that grants wishes. This discovery is the starting point for a plot that quickly shifts towards Sarah, who finds an ancient magical book with the power to alter reality itself, becoming the center of the story. With the book in her hands, Sarah begins to send or gather characters in a completely arbitrary way, combining impossible pairs and generating chaotic situations that transform Elmore's world unpredictably. This mechanism introduces a fascinating meta-narrative in which imagination and creativity are not only forces of expression, but active elements capable of rewriting history, though with out-of-control consequences. The line between reality and fantasy blurs, and the world we knew begins to crumble under the weight of unleashed magic. As the chaos grows, Gumball and Darwin must intervene to stop this madness, facing challenges that combine elements of the real world with the fantasies and inventions that the book imprints on reality. The narrative tension rises as they try to convince Sarah to reverse the changes before the world becomes irreparably altered and destroyed by the magical alterations. The blend of the fantastic and the everyday gives rise to visually impressive moments and situations as absurd as they are fascinating, showing the series' unique ability to innovate in its storytelling. Finally, the episode culminates with a return to normalcy, although it leaves an unsettling feeling about the power of imagination and its limits, reminding us that creativity can be a force as wonderful as it is dangerous. 4. The Weird One. The struggle to be accepted. This episode centers on Susie, one of the most eccentric and mysterious figures within the Elmore universe. Her unpredictable behavior, combined with the oddity of the gifts she gives to her classmates, makes her a peculiar yet isolated presence within the school community. Although on the surface, she seems indifferent to what others think of her, throughout the episode, a deep vulnerability and a latent desire to be accepted and understood by those around her are revealed. Her uniqueness is simultaneously her shield and her burden, creating a complex character who embodies the challenges of feeling different in a world that often demands conformity. The gifts Susie offers, such as jars of mayonnaise or torn bills, are immediately rejected and mocked, causing her sadness and a growing sense of social exclusion. These odd tokens symbolize not only her disconnect from the social norms, but also the way genuine gestures can be misinterpreted when they don't fit conventional expectations. Gumball, aware of this situation, decides to intervene with good intentions, trying to protect her and help her fit in with the group, although his efforts end up putting more pressure on Susie to change her authentic self and conform to others' expectations. This well-meaning but misguided intervention reflects a common social dynamic where acceptance is conditional upon assimilation rather than true understanding. The plot takes a significant turn when Gumball and Darwin, eager to help, push Susie to adopt a different personality, one more aligned with social norms, which triggers a deep and painful internal conflict in her. The tension between staying true to oneself and succumbing to external pressure is portrayed with emotional depth, highlighting the universal struggle many face when trying to belong. However, at a crucial moment, Susie offers them a final and symbolic gift, her own eyes, through which they can finally experience the world from her unique and personal perspective. This experience radically transforms how Gumball and Darwin understand Susie and her way of seeing reality, breaking down their previous misconceptions and opening the door to genuine empathy. This episode not only combines the absurd and characteristic humor of the series, but also delivers a powerful and emotional message about the importance of accepting people as they are, without trying to force changes to gain social acceptance. The blending of surreal comedy with profound social commentary makes The Weird One stand out as one of the strangest yet most touching episodes, inviting viewers to reflect on themes of diversity, inclusion, and personal authenticity. Ultimately, it is a reminder that embracing differences enriches communities and fosters deeper human connections. 5. The Double. The confusion of identity. In this episode, the plot revolves around the sudden and unexpected appearance of a doppelganger of Gumball in Elmore, a phenomenon that might initially seem like the typical narrative device used in many series to create comedic or confusing situations. However, what sets this episode apart is how this seemingly simple premise develops into a strange and deeply unsettling journey, inviting both the main character and the viewer to question reality itself. This double is not just a visual copy of Gumball, it also mimics his movements and voice almost exactly, though with subtle distortions that become disturbing. These subtle differences generate an increasing feeling of discomfort, as if something is wrong or out of place, even though everything seems normal at first glance. As the story progresses, Gumball begins to experience an existential crisis as he tries to discern which parts of his life and identity are real and which are being manipulated by the presence of this strange duplicate. The series masterfully plays with perception and reality, building an atmosphere of growing paranoia and confusion. Scenes alternate between moments when both Gumballs seem indistinguishable and others where the differences between them become blurry, almost imperceptible, adding an extra layer of psychological tension. Not even Gumball himself can be certain who is the real one, creating a disturbing effect for the viewer who shares the protagonist's uncertainty and disorientation. Narratively, this episode challenges the usual conventions of the Amazing World of Gumball. Instead of following a linear or conventional structure based on obvious comedic situations, the chapter uses visual and stylistic devices that emphasize confusion and disarray. For example, it resorts to visual effects that distort the image, repetitions, and small details that alter the viewer's perception, reinforcing the feeling that reality is fragmented and cannot be fully trusted. This approach turns the episode into a more psychological experience than a humorous one, although it never loses the irreverent and fun tone typical of the series. Ultimately, the double functions as a metaphor about identity and self-perception. It explores deep and complex themes such as the fragmentation of the self, inner duality, and the struggle to understand what defines us as individuals. These are themes rarely treated in depth within the children's animation genre, making this chapter an outstanding example of the series' ability to go beyond superficial humor and address existential questions in an accessible and entertaining way. Moreover, the episode invites reflection on how the image we project to others can differ from who we really are, and how external perception can affect our internal identity. By playing with the idea of an unsettling double that reflects and distorts Gumball's personality, the chapter underscores the complexity of self-definition and the difficulty of finding coherence in a chaotic and often contradictory world. In conclusion, The Double is much more than an episode about identity confusion. It is a deep and creative exploration of the nature of the self, brilliantly combining humor and absurdity with complex psychological elements. It represents a perfect example of how the Amazing World of Gumball can deliver entertaining yet intellectually stimulating content, allowing viewers of all ages to enjoy and find meaning in its unique and sometimes surreal universe. 6. The Clown. Scary fun. This episode begins with the arrival of a new clown in Elmore, a figure that, in principle, should bring joy, laughter, and fun to the characters. However, from his first moments on screen, it becomes clear that something is wrong with this clown. Instead of generating happiness, his presence causes an unsettling feeling and a strange mixture of discomfort and fear that grows throughout the episode. What should have been a source of delight quickly morphs into a creeping nightmare, with the clown's eerie demeanor casting a shadow over every scene he inhabits. The clown behaves in an exaggeratedly friendly way, almost like a programmed automaton designed to make people laugh, but with mechanical movements and forced males that become increasingly sinister. His insistence on telling jokes that nobody understands and that seem nonsensical contributes to creating an almost palpable atmosphere of tension. The visual aesthetic of the episode also changes radically, with saturated colors, intense contrasts, and unsettling music that depart completely from the typical joy and lightness associated with clowns, generating an oppressive and disturbing environment. These deliberate artistic choices deepen the viewer's sense of unease, highlighting how something normally considered innocent can be twisted into a source of fear. Throughout the story, the characters repeatedly try to avoid the clown, but their efforts constantly fail, as if trapped in an endless nightmare from which they cannot escape. The situations become increasingly absurd and terrifying, playing with the fear of the unknown and the feeling of being out of control. This cyclical chase evokes classic horror tropes, yet it is filtered through Gumball's quirky, surreal lens, making the fear simultaneously relatable and bizarre. The clown's omnipresence symbolizes the inescapable nature of certain anxieties, cleverly disguised as a figure of laughter. The episode's ending offers no clear solution or comforting closure, but leaves open the idea that true fun can hide a dark, disturbing, and difficult to understand side. This episode stands out for its bold mix of childlike humor and elements of psychological horror, creating a unique experience within the amazing world of Gumball. The combination of these two opposing dimensions makes the clown one of the strangest, most unsettling, and memorable moments of the entire series, once again demonstrating the show's ability to innovate and surprise its audience. By blurring the lines between joy and fear, the episode challenges viewers to reconsider their assumptions about what fun really means, revealing how easily delight can slip into discomfort. 7. The Experiment. Science Weird. In this episode, the Watterson family gets involved in a scientific experiment that, as is usual in the amazing world of Gumball, quickly turns into complete and surreal chaos. The initial premise is simple and even innocent, testing whether it's possible to grow a giant plant. This idea, which in another context could be the starting point of a regular experiment, in the world of Gumball turns into a crazy adventure where the rules of logic and nature are completely ignored. What begins as a harmless curiosity soon spirals into an uncontrollable botanical invasion, challenging not just the physical space of their home, but the very boundaries of reality within the show's universe. As the plants begin to grow uncontrollably, invading the house, the school, and practically all of Elmore, the situation shifts from being an interesting experiment to a real disaster that could endanger everyone. However, what truly sets this episode apart isn't the giant plants or the visual overflow, but the way the characters react to the chaos. Instead of panicking, getting alarmed, or rushing to fix the problem, the Watterson family responds with an almost astonishing calmness, accepting the madness as part of their daily routine. Their dialogue and attitudes, full of absurd and dark humor, reinforce the idea that in Elmore, the strange and irrational are the norm, not the exception. This approach creates a unique atmosphere where absurdity blends with the everyday, relegating scientific logic to the background in favor of humor and extravagance. The characters seem indifferent to the threat, creating a disconcerting yet amusing sensation for viewers, especially adults, who can appreciate the satire and parody of scientific experiments and their possible out-of-control consequences. The show's clever writing pokes fun at the often overly serious depiction of science in media by turning it into a playground for imaginative chaos and comic relief, which resonates with audiences tired of traditional, predictable storytelling. By the episode's end, the experiment leaves a clear impression. Logic and common sense have been deliberately sacrificed to boost comedy and visual creativity. This approach might confuse younger viewers who may expect a more traditional resolution, but it is precisely this break from the norm that makes this episode a brilliant example of the series' ability to innovate and surprise, transforming a simple scientific test into a surreal and unforgettable spectacle. The episode ultimately celebrates the joy of letting go of rules, embracing the unexpected, and finding humor in the absurdities of everyday life, which is the very essence of the amazing world of Gumball. 8. Turtle, the episode that feels like a strange dream. This episode is one of the most dreamlike, puzzling, and atmospheric in the amazing world of Gumball. At first glance, the plot seems simple and even innocent. Gumball and Darwin must take care of a turtle. However, what could have been a common and ordinary story turns into an experience that feels like a strange, almost surreal dream, radically departing from the show's usual style and taking us into much more experimental and psychological narrative territory. From the start, the episode wraps itself in a different atmosphere. The colors, normally bright and saturated, become muted and almost washed out, while the music adopts unsettling tones, with sustained notes that generate a subtle but constant tension. The characters' movements slow down and become almost hypnotic, as if time in Elmore has inexplicably slowed. This audio-visual combination creates an almost hypnotic effect, enveloping the viewer in a trance-like state, as if trapped in a dream they cannot wake from. Throughout the episode, time seems to stop at various points, and conversations become increasingly absurd, with phrases lacking logical sense, yet somehow provoking a strange and disturbing sensation. This deliberate incoherence not only adds a touch of surrealism, but also intensifies the dreamlike atmosphere, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. In this context, the turtle, seemingly a simple little animal, takes on a much deeper and symbolic meaning. It becomes a reflection of complex emotions like anxiety, uncertainty, or fear of responsibility, subjects rarely handled with such subtlety and ambiguity in a children's show. The episode's ending is equally enigmatic. It offers no clear resolution or traditional closure, but leaves the viewer with a feeling of being stuck in an endless cycle, as if the story were a dream from which there is no awakening. This open and puzzling finale reinforces the chapter's dreamlike nature, inviting reflection on the nature of time, perception, and human emotions, wrapped in the simple but unsettling task of caring for a turtle. For many fans and critics, Turtle is the clearest example of how the amazing world of Gumball can break away from its usual tone to venture into far more psychological, strange, and challenging territories. It breaks audience expectations and shows that behind the absurd humor and cartoonish characters, there is room to explore deeper and more atmospheric themes, elevating the series to a narrative creativity level rarely seen in children's animation. 9. The World, the most chaotic episode. The World is undoubtedly one of the most random and chaotic episodes in the entire Amazing World of Gumball series, a true parade of absurdity that seems to abandon any traditional narrative structure or logic. From the moment it begins, the episode presents a challenge to the viewer. How do you follow a story that deliberately avoids having one? There is no plot, no main characters driving a storyline, just a succession of wild scenes that feel more like a collage or a series of improvised sketches, linked only by the surreal atmosphere of Elmore. The episode kicks off with an unexpected and catchy choral song performed by secondary characters who barely appear in other episodes. This song functions as a kind of spontaneous anthem for the town and the series itself, with the phrase, "We do all this and more because we are the amazing world of Elmore," perfectly capturing the chaotic and ruleless essence of the episode. This musical introduction is a statement of intent. Here, you're not coming to hear a conventional story, but to dive into a whirlwind of absurd and visually striking situations. From that moment on, the narrative dissolves into a sea of chaos. Scenes unfold without transitions or apparent logic, and real characters give way to inanimate objects, acting as if they have their own life and personality. For example, we see the moon bothering the sun with sarcastic comments, a light switch playing cruel jokes on a bulb, and bacteria reproducing for no reason or context. Each situation works like a small independent sketch, where absurdity and incongruity are the only rules. The visual sequence feels like an endless chain of disconnected moments, challenging viewers to find meaning or purpose, as if the creators decided to experiment with form and rhythm in animation without worrying about building a solid narrative. This kind of episode deeply divides the audience. For some, the World represents experimental art, a bold demonstration of creative freedom where television conventions are deliberately broken to offer something different and refreshing. The use of absurd humor, breaking the fourth wall, and lack of plot become elements challenging the traditional perception of children's entertainment, leaning more toward an artistic performance than a classic episode. For others, however, the chapter is little more than filler, a collection of sketches without substance that may feel boring or frustrating due to the absence of a clear story or characters that inspire empathy or interest. From a personal perspective, these episodes can be entertaining, but also empty. The visual and auditory experience is fast, chaotic, and fragmented, similar to how we consume fleeting content on platforms like TikTok, where attention rapidly moves from one clip to another without depth or continuity. Despite this lack of cohesion, the creators of Gumball deserve credit for daring to break the rules and explore new creative territories, even if that means sacrificing logic, plot, and narrative coherence. That bravery to experiment is part of what has kept the series fresh and relevant for so many years. Moreover, the World serves as a reminder that the Amazing World of Gumball isn't just any children's show. It is willing to play with expectations, subvert genres, and explore the limits of animation and humor, Although not every episode connects with every viewer, this type of narrative experiment enriches the television landscape and expands what is considered possible in a children's animated series. In summary, the world is a dizzying journey through chaos and absurdity, an episode that embraces meaninglessness as a form of expression, and that, for better or worse, leaves an indelible mark as one of the strangest and most experimental moments in the amazing world of Gumball. Its value lies in its ability to defy logic and entertain, with an explosive mix of absurd humor, visual creativity, and a cheeky celebration of the unexpected. 10. The Decision. Gumball's most suspicious moment. At first glance, this episode doesn't stand out much. It seems like a standard installment in the series, without particularly extraordinary events, until a scene arrives that's so strange, it deserves a spot on this list by itself. Everything revolves around an apparently harmless message about healthy eating. Vegetables are the foundation of a balanced diet. It's essential to eat at least 5 servings a day. So far, nothing unusual, but the way they say it and what happens right afterward make it suspicious, even inappropriate for a children's show. The tone and context make it feel more like a parody than genuine advice, and many adult fans have pointed it out as one of the most suspicious moments in the entire series. What's curious is that, watching these episodes as an adult, you start noticing details that went completely unnoticed as a child. Hidden references, comedic innuendos for older viewers, and twists that make you wonder if this really aired on Cartoon Network. Maybe that's part of Gumball's charm. It's double reading. But still, this moment was too much. Conclusion. The brilliance of the amazing world of Gumball lies in its courage to experiment and break molds, creating episodes that range from absurd to reflective. By combining humor, creativity, and a meta approach, it has managed to hold the audience's attention and affection for years. These episodes prove that innovation and narrative risk-taking are key to keeping an animated series magical and fresh over time. Today, we're going to discover what made this series so special, why it remains alive in so many memories, and how it achieved something almost no modern cartoon can boast: never becoming boring. So stay until the end, because what you're about to see will make you look at Gumball with new eyes. And if you like this video, I invite you to subscribe and share it so more fans can relive the magic of Elmore together.